welcome to the Amesbury Carriage Museum's 36th annual meeting. It's amazing to say that. And it's also amazing to welcome you to the Industrial History Center. So I know a year ago, well, we will talk a little bit more about that. A year ago, I know we were on Zoom. So it's nice to be in person. It still feels a little bit edgy as we're doing this. I know, and I appreciate everyone for wearing a mask. I'll put mine on when I'm done speaking. So I'm John Mayer, director of the Amesbury Carriage Museum, so welcome. I wanted to, before we get started, to recognize our program sponsors. So every year, the Carriage Museum benefits from support from different people in the community, and this money helps us do our programs. So Ed Selden and Lisa Witham, Amesbury Chair with Wayne Barbaro, Amesbury Industrial Supply, and Greg Jardis. Greg just arrived. BB Alarm Systems, and that's Bart Bailey, and Sacris Design with Jennifer Sanborn. They are our annual sponsors. And program sponsors are Mike Harold and Leah Cabine, Peter and Patty Hoyt, and Tom Pendergast. So let's say thank you to those very kind and generous people who help us do what we're doing. So we're streaming live to Facebook. I never thought I would ever say those words, but indeed it's true. So we have an audience streaming, and at different times we may get questions from the Facebook audience. I'm sure they are watching intently as this program develops. So stay tuned for that. And without further ado, we'll launch into the Amesbury Carriage Museum business meeting. I'd like to introduce Chris Duraki, President of the Board of Directors.
Thank you, John. I welcome you to the 36th annual meeting, but I really welcome you to the first annual meeting in the Industrial History Center. Thinking back a year ago when we were on Zoom, it's just an incredible venue. It's an incredible amount of work that went into this facility, and very, very proud to be at the helm of a group of a board with a ton of hidden talents, a board that is dedicated and tireless. And it really, it's a privilege to work with these people. And what I'd like to do is to get down to acknowledging the board members who have rotated off or completed their terms of service. First is Courtney McClatchin. I had the opportunity to speak with her earlier. She's just a fantastic person. It was a privilege to work with her, and she's left her mark on the Amesbury Carriage Museum and on the Industrial History Center. Susan Koso, another great member, linked to the earlier days of the Carriage Museum and what was important to those members, Holly Patton, Harriet Gould, individuals such as that, and also Maris Totola. I'd like also to present the 2021 through 2022 Board of Directors. I am going to be president for at least another year, they tell me. Thomas Pendergast, Vice President, just a tireless volunteer, Chairman of the Construction Committee, a lot of responsibility for what you see here, just never stops. The type of guy that if you ask for a volunteer, he's first in line and is there. I want to welcome Lorna Condon. She has jumped into the fire and is going to be our new secretary. Mary Chatney, immediate past president. And I'd like to thank Peter Doyle, acting treasurer. Just a round of applause for that. The board members, Patricia Boyle-Steed, Chairman, Family and Youth Program Workshop, Peter Hoyt, Chair, Program Committee and Co-Chair of the Campaign Committee, Joyanne Reynolds, Chair, Collections Committee. Peter Cease, Webmaster and Chair, Communications Work Group. Tom Murphy. Janice Valverde, Chair, Development Committee. A new member that was just voted on over the weekend, Pamela Fenner. We're very happy to welcome you to our board. To end with those thoughts, this is a board that can reach consensus. It can move forward on all issues. And again, I couldn't be more proud to be a member of it, and I've enjoyed it since I became a member. I'd like to take a moment to thank John Mayer and Bonnie Brady, who they're both the backbone of the museum. We're a bunch of volunteers. We've put a lot of time in, but the day-to-day operations are accomplished by these two. The decision to hire John was the catalyst that got us to where we are today, and that's an amazing thing. John has the vision of the Amesbury Carriage Museum and the Industrial History Center. He could see this when I don't think all of us could. He has an endless quest for professionalism and excellence. He tries to make us do things right. He's a true leader of a group of volunteers and has a passion for the ACM and the IHC. John, we are so lucky to have you, and I thank you for doing what you do for us. Bonnie Brady, thank you. She's basically the reason why things happen and that they happen smoothly. She also has a very highly valued opinion that we listen to at the board level. So thank you, Bonnie. We're lucky to have you. So everything has come together. Look at this place. It's magnificent. It's just outrageous. You know, together, this is the most exciting time for the Amesbury Carriage Museum and the Industrial History Center. We got here through leadership, through John, through Bonnie, and through the incredible generosity of donors. The community was just incredible. The amount of money raised, the commitment, the support. I wanted to point out two of our largest donors, Dan Healy and Greg Jardis, of course. Greg provided this space, and it has just turned out, it's really location. To be in the mill yard, and it's just beautiful. I get a smile. I walk from my office in the lower mill yard, and I come up and I go to Ovidia for a cup of coffee. And I just can't help. I look through the Hamilton Gateway, and it just brings a smile to my face to see what's happened here, and to think about what's going to happen. One of the things is the building is complete, so now it's time to get down to developing exhibits, developing programs, and making this place hum. We hired a director of engagement and interpretation. I really don't know what this person exactly does. It's above my pay grade. But Jessica Neurath, she'll be leading program development, and that is going to free up John to do other things in regards to exhibits and to develop content for the museum moving forward. The first exhibit will open soon. The mission of the Carriage Museum has always been and continues to be to champion the history of Amesbury's industry and people. Our other favorite line is that community stories are told here. So that's exactly where we wanted to be, and it's exactly where we're going to be. What will the future bring? It'll be exactly what you see here at the Industrial History Center. There'll be exhibits, there'll be programs, there'll be collaboration with local schools, and we have an openness. We had a few open houses where we invited different groups and the city councilors, and we invited the local Amesbury treasures. So we want to promote and work with all organizations. We want to provide information to the public about their resources. We want to be a hub so we can send people to other museums, to other attractions in Amesbury. Because of our location, we feel that we have the ability to just not only promote ourselves, but to promote all of the cultural organizations in Amesbury. And we have also, I know that John has been working with several of those organizations, is that they're loaning us exhibits to augment our programs and our first exhibit. So it's just wonderful to be here. I love this space, a lot of hard work, a lot of community support. I want to thank the community for its generosity and support. And I'd like to invite everyone to explore the Industrial History Center's first exhibit in October. I know that Mary Chatney had asked to be able to make an announcement. Yes, Mary.
I just wanted to announce to the members that we'll be sending out a member survey. Now that we have a facility, we want to hear from our members about what they would like to see as member benefits and why they're part of the organization. And, so we can learn more how to be better in our community. We can deliver to you what you're looking for. So just you'll be getting that in the next couple of weeks, and we encourage you to please complete the survey because it will inform our work as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. I'd like to introduce Peter Hoyt, co-chair of the campaign committee.
Thank you very much, Chris. Take this off without taking my hearing aids off. I did it. Thank you all for being here this evening. This is truly, in my mind, an historic day. Certainly a historic evening in the life of the Amesbury Carriage Museum. Every time I walk into this space, I feel like my long-departed colleagues are right beside me. Margaret Rice, Holly Patton, Willard Flanders, Harriet Gould Woodson, my cousins Betty and Teeny Goodwin, and countless others who would always say the carriages are the thing. And it only took John Mayer to help us as a board of directors to recognize that while we celebrate the carriage history in Amesbury, we also celebrate the rich industrial history, whether it's boat building, textile, automotive, hat, nail, you name it. Greg Jardis and I are honored to have co-chaired the Capital campaign, and it's almost unbelievable, Mary, where's Mary, to say that we are $19,117 shy of reaching that goal. I'm going to read from my notes, but while I'm reading from them, please feel free to read what John has put before you in the slide. I love to say these figures because it just blows my mind. To date, the funds received by the Capital campaign are $907,982. The outstanding pledges are $31,500 to total $939,883. The project budget is $959,000. And so if you do the math, I'm not a real skilled mathematician, but I have a good coach at home who double checks my figures. $19,117 left to be raised. I cannot begin to thank you enough as co-chair of the Capital Campaign Committee for your generosity. Once again, the community of Amesbury has come forward and opened their purses and their pocketbooks and their pockets in a way that is just extraordinary. Whether the gift was a $10 donation or a $175,000 donation, or the space in which we find ourselves, every gift has been gratefully received and so very appreciated. A total of 185 gifts. I think it's important to read the names of the lead donors. The Mary Alice Arcalian Foundation, Ken and Rachel Aspelay, the Bailey family, 18 donors, members of the Bailey family, and the Bailey room is right there. Jay Gould, and I would suggest that the business at Flatbread Pizza has increased since we've arrived here. Dan Healy III, Peter and Janet Hodge, the Institution for Savings, Greg T. Jardis, who celebrated his birthday on Friday. Happy birthday, Mr. Jardis. The Institution for Savings, did I say that already? Mark and Dolores McBurney, John and Deborah Mayer, the Massachusetts Cultural Council, the Newburyport Bank, Tom and Diane Pendergast, Matt Sherrill, Kathy Stevens, and David Warius, and all of you. Thank you once again for being here. We look forward to seeing you in this space lots and lots of times for years to come. And I do want to say that I'm grateful to Pat Boyle-Steed, who is the new chair of the programming committee, and extraordinary work is taking place under Pat's leadership. So thanks, Pat, and thanks to all of you. Have a great night.
Good evening, everybody. I feel like a broken record up here because I want to obviously invite you, welcome you to the Industrial History Center here. And I actually feel badly for the people who are watching this on Facebook Live because they're missing the space. And I invite all those people to come down once we're open fully. It's incredible to see what we've accomplished in the past year or so. It was mentioned earlier at our September meeting, which was on Zoom last year, and at that time, the floors had just been polished, the concrete work had been done, and we were starting with 4 basic walls. So once that was done in September, the framing started inside the building, and again, with all the subsystems and the rough work was done. Keep in mind that because of COVID, we had to severely limit the number of people who were in here at any given time. So progress was slow, and at the same time, prices, because of product availability, was a problem, and our costs continued to rise. In November, the plaza construction began, and we were overly optimistic, and we were hoping that the plaza was going to be completed before the winter weather set in, which did not happen. And I give the crew an awful lot of credit because even though dealing with the cold and the winter conditions, they progressed right through the entire winter. In December, plastering was done, the walls were painted, and the final systems, electrical, plumbing, and the like, were all completed. That was excellent as well. In January, the exterior doors were finally installed, and it was the first time when you can stand in the site and look out at the view of the mill yard. And to me, that was started to be installed, and the weather played a very, had its effects, the same as with the construction of the plaza as well. Right now, small details are being identified and addressed. The major emphasis is on the exhibits, preparing the exhibits so that we can open in next month. I want to thank the building committee, Joe Fahey and Joshua Jackson for their support and their involvement. I also want to single out and thank Merrimack Design, Ironwood Landscape Design, BLB Custom Construction and all their subcontractors, Rye Beach and Mountaintop Landscaping, and InnoFab, who produced the canopy. I would also just like to say, if you're looking for any details as far as the construction of the space, go to YouTube, type in Amesbury Carriage Museum, and there's a series of videos produced by Merrill Goldsmith with Frank Gerzak on behind the scenes. And they are excellent, and it'll give you an idea as the scope of work that went on to make this place happen. And again, as Peter stated, coming in here gives me a great sense of pride for all the work that an awful lot of people have done to make this happen. And I want to thank all of you here because you made this happen. This is all just from the generosity of the community. So, thank you very much. Oh, we have a sort of slideshow. And what it began with, that was probably January with the plastering done. This work was done just this past Friday when the murals were posted by the entry doors. And there we are today. It's pretty incredible. I also have the benefit, I guess you could say, of presenting a little bit of our financial status. Amesbury Carriage Museum remains strong. We don't have any real definite figures. For the first time in the history of the Carriage Museum, a full financial audit is being performed. But I can tell you that from operations, we have basically broken even due to sacrifices that were made by the executive director, PPP money, and also contributions from people. And Peter has also already addressed where we stand with the campaign, capital campaign. So we're ending. A year ago when we started thinking about where we were going to be now, we were looking at serious deficits. And due to an awful lot of hard work, again, by John Mayer.
It's been a lifelong part of my work to be working in museums. It's something I love deeply. I find tremendous meaning and value in that work, and I can go on, and this is not the time for that. But thank you for coming. I would say after hearing what Chris and Peter and Tom have said, I think you'll agree with me that it's an understatement when I say we've accomplished a lot. I took a moment and I thought about that the other day, and it made me exhausted. Because I was looking through my phone at all the pictures, and I was remembering the challenges that we encountered along the way. Different contractors backing out, cost of materials going up, trying to keep our programs going. So that it really has been a year unlike any other, a challenging year, but we have a great group of people, and because of that, I think we are doing well. One of the things that I am most proud about is the fact that we are building an organization. I think I was very young in my career, and somebody said a museum is not a building. So we're doing great work having the Industrial History Center, but the Industrial History Center isn't what makes a museum. It's all of you. It's the board, it's the staff, it's the community that help us do the work that we do. So I say to you, thank you, because I know each of you have contributed to this project in different ways. And it's true, last year I was looking at that too. We had, oh boy, I need to remember his name. He's the director of the New England Museum Association. He was our annual meeting speaker, and we were on Zoom. And I can't wait to terminate my subscription to Zoom. It is such a gift, and it's such a headache. The way we relate is not so good. But here we are in person, limited. It's ironic. We wanted to get people in here, but we didn't want to get all those people in here. We had to tap down what we wanted to do. So I'm grateful that you all are willing to come. We're wearing masks, and we're social distanced. But this, I hope, is the beginning, and I hope it's also progress for us. I wanted to say, and I know Chris did a nice job by acknowledging our staff. So it's very true. We've worked very well together. It was last year that and the word was we made a pivot, and we started to do online programming, and we welcomed Meryl Goldsmith on to our team as the curator of online programming. Meryl is here tonight helping to run our Facebook program, so thank you, Meryl. And Bonnie Brady, I think it may be coming up on 3 years that we worked together, and it's incredible the work that we're able to accomplish, and I thank you for that. It's wonderful. Chris, I will speak with after the program too. We have a new staff member, Jessica Newworth, the Director of Engagement and Interpretation. And that is this new opportunity we have to make the History Center come alive. And I am so grateful that we were able to find Jessica. She's deeply experienced. She said she was impressed by our focus on connecting people to the built environment. Our conversations and her interview lines up exactly with what we're looking for. So I have great hopes, and she's already been helping me with the exhibit program that we're developing for the History Center. So I'd like to say thank you to the HCM staff for all that you do. And oops, I jumped ahead. A couple things I wanted to say. I knew I have to do this. So our accomplishments for the past year, I mean, this is, number one. I think this could be a full-time job in itself, managing construction, doing the fundraising to make this happen. Our pivot to online programming was another accomplishment because it allowed us to continue to reach our community and actually add more. We found new ways to bring people into our programs, something that we're going to learn from and continue. And the other thing that happened that I think is pretty remarkable is in the midst of this pandemic, because of our office location, we're able to have an intern. We actually had 2 interns who were part of the Simmons University Library program. So we had graduate students helping us develop and explore and understand what we can do with our library. And all of that is part of our effort to build what I would call a campus in the Amesbury Mill Yard. We have an office space, we have the counting house storefront, we have a library, we have this program space, and that then gets us to our challenges. One critical challenge we have is to finally find a home for our collection. We have had to move our collection to temporary quarters. One day, this is my next dream, is to have an annex where that collection can be available and made part of our programs. So that is number one. Well, actually, number one is to help Jessica so that we can open our doors on October 15th and launch our programs and our exhibits from the History Center. And then the final one is, this ever-present goal, which is to make the Amesbury Carriage Museum a healthy, vibrant, and sustainable organization. Little by little, I think we're getting there. 6 years ago, we were at the beginning point, and here we are today. So I hope you'll share with me this great hope that I have. Great things are ahead for Amesbury and the Amesbury Carriage Museum. So thank you very much. So a couple of calendar dates to mention. I would be remiss if not, and after the program, see Bonnie. She can tell you a little bit more about driving through history. This is actually a very fun fundraiser. One of our goals is to have fun. And at Amesbury Chevrolet, we have an event that features some vintage cars. We have an in-person auction. There's food, there's music. It's a great social gathering at Amesbury Chevrolet. And it's the day before the car show. So it gets your appetite up to see more vehicles. And then on Saturday, September 25th, we'll have a very active presence in the car show, which is quite an event, and every year gets better and better. And then as we've all mentioned, starting October 15th will be our opening celebration for the Industrial History Center. We have a week of events that we're developing, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and it'll bring to closure this piece of work that we've been working on for 3 years. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. I am going to now turn to our guest speaker, Isaac Kestenbaum. I am thrilled to have Isaac here. Isaac is the director of the SALT Institute for Documentary Studies. I reached out to Isaac to ask if he'd be willing to present a program for us. The title of his talk, Folk History, Community Narratives, and Storytelling. Oops, I'm going to have to go back. So I have a short bio I'll share with you. Isaac, I was very impressed to learn more about Isaac's experiences. He's an audio producer, journalist, co-founder and production of the co-founder of the production company Future Projects. He's been a newspaper reporter, a farmer, a stern man on a commercial lobster boat. Comes from Portland with his wife and 2 young boys. So Isaac, thank you. It's a pleasure to have you here, and I will switch over the PowerPoint and have you up. So thank you, Isaac.
Hello. Hi, everybody. No worries. So, just to clarify, I am from Portland, Maine. I do come from Portland, Maine, with a wife and 2 children, but the children are not here. Luckily for all of us, especially.
Oh, stop.
Is this okay? Can everyone hear me? Is this good? Yeah. All right. So I'm just curious, I know some people have not heard of SALT. I overheard a little bit as I was sitting here. Who has heard of the SALT Institute for Documentary Studies? All right. Who has not heard of the SALT Institute? So many people. All right. I guess what I'm going to do tonight is I'm just going to talk about sort of the history of what SALT is, hopefully make it a little more familiar to all of you. I'm going to talk about kind of where we have come from and where we are now, and I think where we're going. So to tell the story of SALT, we have to start in Georgia, in Rabun Gap, Nacoochee County, Georgia, which is in Appalachia. In 1967, there was a high school English teacher, and he noticed that like a lot of these stories in the community that his students lived in, his high school students lived in, were being lost. As this kind of older generation passed on, there was a lot of knowledge, a lot of folk knowledge that was not being preserved. So he kind of sent his students out into the field to do oral history style interviews with elders in the community. And the result was this project called Foxfire. Has anyone heard of Foxfire? Okay, so Foxfire is kind of in the DNA of what SALT is, as you'll see. So Foxfire, it becomes a magazine that is produced by these high school students. It's named for a glow-in-the-dark bioluminescent mushroom that grows in Appalachia. And the magazine is very detailed sort of interviews with folks in the region about kind of folk life, so traditions, like this is one of like how to fell a tree with an axe. This one's about notching and jointing. So these are very kind of, each magazine is filled with articles about these really detailed articles about kind of folk life and what's going on there. Here's one about making quilts. These are just images from the magazine, from Foxfire. And it becomes very, very popular. So they're compiled into a book called the Foxfire Book, and I think there's like 9 of them at least. Foxfire still exists as well. And Elliot Wigginton, the guy, he actually wins a MacArthur Fellowship, and it kind of spawns similar programs in other schools. It almost becomes like a franchise that like other schools adopt this. So in addition to the Foxfire book, we have the Loblolly book, which is like the Texas version of the Foxfire book. And all of them seem to have this thing where, I don't know if it was like required, but they all kind of list a few things. This one is the Foxfire book, hog dressing, log cabin building, mountain crafts and foods, planting by the signs, snake lore, hunting tales, faith healing, moonshining, and other affairs of plain living. And this one's the Loblolly book in Texas is water witching, wild hog hunting, home remedies, grandma's moral tales, and other affairs of plain Texas living. So they all kind of list this. This one doesn't. This is Bittersweet Country. It's in the Ozarks. It's another sort of very inspired by Foxfire series. Apparently 37 high schools adopted this, so there's other ones out there, and I'm sort of obsessed with them. I try to collect these books if I can find them, but they're very hard to search for, so if anyone knows of any, let me know. It goes as far as Alaska. There's the Chamai book, which is kayaks, dog sleds, bear hunting, bush pilots, smoked fish, mukluks, and other traditions of southwestern Alaska. And then you probably guess where this is going. There's the salt book. So salt also comes from this sort of, obviously from this Foxfire history. So if you can't read it, it's lobstering, sea moss pudding, stone walls, rum running, maple syrup, snowshoes, and other Yankee doings. There's a cover of the very first Salt magazine under a pier. And it was started by a woman named Pamela Wood, and she was an English teacher right up 95 from here in Kennebunk. I'll just read this to you. So it says, very simply, it's about the Yankee seacoast and the people who live here. Our stories are told by the sons and daughters of old-time New Englanders, as well as the children of more recent settlers who have fled the cities to live on these proud and yielding shores. Why salt? Because salt is a natural symbol for the magazine, the salt of the sea, salt-washed soil, salt marshes, and salty people. So, I think what's interesting about this is, first that it's driven by the sort of the curiosity of students, which I think is pretty amazing. But also, I was thinking about capturing stories from a community. And I think one of the things that SALT has done pretty elegantly over the years is to evolve and think about what it means to, how do you define the community that you're trying to capture the stories of? So one thing that I was struck by, the sort of the original mission statement of SALT, is that it's very specific. It's old-time sons and daughters of old-time New Englanders, as well as more recent settlers. So there's no mention of any indigenous people here or immigrants, or so I think at first they weren't thinking as broadly about their mission, or our mission, I guess I should say. So here's just some examples from SALT magazine. Very similar to the Foxfire stuff. Very practical. How to knit a lobster trap head, and you all could knit a lobster trap head after you read this. Is that detailed? I'm sure. Here's another one about a clammer who no one has ever beaten. Another one. There's the students from the very first ever SALT magazine. There they are again. So high school students. This is from later on. I'm just going to share you kind of how our mission of community storytelling has evolved. So this is another sort of glimpse of SALT's mission, and here in the, I think this is from the early 80s, late 70s. It's pretty much the same mission statement, except it now includes, it says that in addition to the sons and daughters of old-time New Englanders, it's also French-Canadian settlers and descendants of Native Indian tribes. So we're starting to think more broadly about whose stories we consider part of the community. It's just another nice SALT magazine cover for you all. I really love the design of these. So this is another way that our mission has evolved. So it says, the essence of the quarterly magazine consists of documented interviews with distinctive people whose roots run deep and whose memories span generations. SALT seeks to preserve the stories, record the skills, and explain ways of doing things known to a fast vanishing generation. So it's very much a sort of preservation, minded mission to SALT at this point. And then, so SALT kind of evolves. It splits off. We split off from the high school and kind of become an independent organization. So we offer instruction in writing and photography, but also for a few years, SALT offers apprenticeships. So you could also come to SALT and learn boat building, or animal husbandry, or like truck farming, seamanship and fishing, and general construction. So I think it's very interesting that those become as important to SALT's mission as documenting the community with writing and photography is. So eventually SALT starts to think of itself as three things, which is what is SALT? It's a magazine, an educational experience, and an archive of Maine folk life and culture. So really thinking about like what we mean to the community. And then I think this is really important is SALT starts to sort of have this thing where we talk about documenting the really important people of Maine. And I think that's like maybe a slightly imperfect way of putting it, but I think what we're saying is that there are certain celebrities who maybe like absorb all the attention, and what SALT is trying to do is look at the people who are not that. One of the tenets of doing oral history is you start with people who have the least amount of power, because a lot of times those people have the most to say. So, examples like you would interview the doorman to a building rather than the CEO to find out something. So I think SALT really tries to do that. So the slogan becomes "Spend a semester with the really important people of Maine." And in a world of big headlines and loud noises, SALT magazine provides a quiet corner for reflection, which I think is really a really great way to put it. And then this is just like a little thing that I think was hanging around in the SALT classroom at one point, and it says, stand out in the field, it could be a pasture or a city walk, sniff out a story like Tony the Rockhound sniffs out a quartz crystal, watch people in synagogues, diners, malls, and apple orchards, listen to a Cambodian refugee tell his first joke in English, rap with clam diggers and Muhammad from Afghanistan, hold on to your pen or hold on to your camera, use your sense. So I think at this point, this is probably in the 90s, SALT has really expanded its mission to really be inclusive of the whole community. I think that there's a real effort here to use inclusive language in what we are trying to document. Meanwhile, SALT is moving around a lot. So in 2000, SALT bought this really nice building in downtown Portland. If anyone's been to Portland, it was on Exchange Street, right across from the Portland Press Herald, which is now the Press Hotel, like right in the heart of downtown. And SALT becomes what it is now, which is the SALT Institute for Documentary Studies. And around the same time, they started offering classes in radio as well. So it's writing, photography, and radio. And students come for about 15 weeks. It's moved on from high school students. It's sort of postgraduate, which is what it is today. And you can come and take a class in writing, radio, or photography. You spend about 15 weeks in the state, kind of immersing yourself in your story. So that's kind of what SALT evolves to in the year 2000. That's pretty much what we still do today. And that's the building. And then around 2008, SALT moves to another building here. This is the Conga Street building. And then in 2016, SALT merges with the Maine College of Art. And one of the main reasons that this happened was, I'm sure as you all know, like keeping a small organization afloat is no mean feat. And one of the sort of fables about SALT was that the director, the position that I now have, was also changing light bulbs and fixing toilets and all kinds of things, which is like, which is I think shows a lot of commitment. But what's nice about now that we're part of the Maine College of Art is we have a whole facilities department who can handle that kind of thing. So SALT today is nestled into the Maine College of Art, although now the Maine College of Art is the Maine College of Art and Design. We changed our name only a couple weeks ago. Now we've gone back to the sort of classic heritage SALT logo. So that's sort of where we have come from in our approach to gathering these kind of stories from the community. So what I want to talk about now is, we also have a story archive, which is having technical difficulties, so don't go there right now, but eventually you can go to the SALT Story Archive, and has everything from the last, SALT was founded in 1973, so we're coming on our 50th birthday. So you know, one thing that I think is really interesting about how salt has evolved is I love these old salt pieces. I think there's something so pure about the way the students went out and they like put a microphone in front of someone. A lot of times it was someone who was like related to them, there's something really beautiful and pure about them. And like I said, like you could definitely make a lobster trap head after reading this. But what it isn't really is a story exactly. You know, and a story is like something with tension or a rising action. It's like someone does something because of X, but why? That's usually the kind of the formula that I teach my students when I'm teaching them storytelling. And there isn't really a story here exactly. And I think, I don't know if it's because of kind of where we are right now as a culture or what, but I think like storytelling now is sort of the supreme way that people are sharing these types of stories. So I don't think it's quite as much like, you don't see as much of this these days as you do, I think, storytelling. So you can kind of see these are a couple of recent, relatively recent, well, I guess not really that recent, but this is kind of like the last, this is just, I think, the start of SALT doing some storytelling stuff. So, you know, rather than like how to knit something, this is Dylan Volk in the spotlight, a teenage comic finds success on stage, off stage, it's a different story. So that's already, you can tell that's like, there's a story there, you're gonna learn something. Lost in translation, fleeing car bombs and death threats, 14 Iraqi entrepreneurs resettle in Maine, but life in America presents a new battle. So I don't think necessarily the mission, I think the mission of SALT stays the same, like we are getting these stories from a community, but I think what has changed is that there's a much more storytelling approach to what we're doing now. And I think in some ways that you can tie that back to the direction of audio to the SALT curriculum, because in audio, you just don't have as much time, and you really, the stereotype about audio is that when you're listening to a radio story or a podcast, you're doing something else. You're washing the dishes, or you're driving your car, or you're in line for the bank, or something else. You're not just like, the days of just sitting around a radio are over. So as a maker of audio, you really have to grab people's attention, and sort of the best way to do that is by creating a compelling narrative. So I think partially that has also changed the way that we approach how these stories are, or how these stories are told. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to play an example of a somewhat recent SALT piece, and this takes place in. Sorry, I should bring my phone. All right. So this is in Lubec, Maine. Does anyone know where Lubec is? Lubec is about as far east as you can go and still be in the country. So what happened was that about 10 years ago, people in Lubec, Maine woke up to find a very bad smell. And what had happened was a finback whale had washed up onto the beach. So this is the story of what happened after that. So it's about 6 minutes. I think I'll just try to settle in and go with the flow here. I know I said that the days of gathering around to listen are over, but we're going to go back there right now for a few minutes.
Story about the whale. The story about the whale, please. I understand it's a fish story and all this stuff. It is a big fish. But what happened years ago here in Lubec, Maine? There was a whale that tangled up in the fisherman's line way off, somewhere off a quarter here. The whale could see them, see? And it drifted into shore. It just couldn't swim. So the tide carried it in, and it landed on the beach over here in Lubec. Not too far from here, see? I saw it. I was down there.
It was big. I couldn't tell you how long
The
or.
whale was roughly 55.
56 and a half feet long.
That's a 70-foot animal. That's almost the size of an 18-wheel truck.
To me, it was
It
huge.
was huge.
It was huge.
Laying down would be as high as this
It was
ceiling.
the largest animal that I ever saw.
No wonder in the Holy Bible it says Jonah went into the belly of the whale. There was plenty of room there. That mouth was a big one.
laying there right on top of the beach.
It was laying on its
I
side.
remember it was blackish, grayish color.
He wasn't gray anymore, he wasn't grayish, blackish.
Mostly black and white.
It was white, or whitish, grayish.
There was a lot of moves on it, but it's got.
What it looked like was a piece of salmon to me.
It was a monster.
I was frightened, it was really dead.
His mouth happened to be open. His mouth happened to be open. It was a dead fish, but his mouth happened to be open.
It might have been middle of August or something.
Yeah, August, September, yeah, I got it.
Evidently, it washed up in the night and someone spotted it after daylight laying there on the beach.
That was early in the morning. The word had started to spread that this whale had washed ashore and people started coming in.
I went down by myself, there were plenty of people around.
On the first day we washed up, I went down.
Yeah, we took the kids down to see it,
Little kids were running up to it and touching it.
climbing up on top of the whale, standing on it and get the pictures they give them.
So what? They do nothing. I think people in a small town handle death in a different way. They have to deal with it a lot more often. Everybody knows everybody, so when someone dies, the whole town grieves. I actually went down there, it was coming on to sunset, and I sat on the beach and smoked a cigarette and bawled my eyes out. Yeah, that's what I done. And I don't want back down. And we lived probably 1,000 feet from the beach.
The mystery of the whole thing is how we got there. Nobody knows if it died off in the bay and floated ashore, or whether it grounded itself out and died on the beach, or whether it just got confused. Nobody knows.
It washed up on the beach.
He got smelled, that could have been,
I guess that's what happened to him, he drowned.
get clear.
You know, this is where it wanted to be. They called the Coast Guard to see if they could tow it back offshore, let it go some other town. But they wouldn't do it.
Because there'd already been a couple other places, and that's what they done, they towed it out, and we back finally wound up with it.
There was no boats big enough.
And depending upon the way the wind is blowing, and the currents are running, something runs across what you do. And this thing laid on the beach for days while the town was trying to determine how they were gonna get rid of it.
And it's impossible, because government didn't know what to do. We were arguing, one branch of government, arguing.
It was too big to move. Couldn't move it, he couldn't do anything.
We're a very poor town. We're the poorest county in the state of Maine, and that we'd be the ones having to put
In
the
a small town in Quebec, it was big doing.
Other people in the town office, and the whole 9 yards were all disturbed, because like any dead body, it began to smell, you know. It stinks the town. A lot of people were saying, we got to move out of here and tell the other, this whale, see?
You could smell it. Low tide smells around here anyway, but this reeked to death.
Rotten meat that sat in the sun for a month. You just take the cover off your hands, stick your head in there, that's just what it smelled like.
It was an oily, greasy
I'm
smell.
afraid to know
Oh, it smelled like rotten.
rotten fish or
They
poison.
they couldn't stand it, you know, when the wind was blowing that direction right on the
You
town.
smell it from miles away.
Far away as he put me, they could smell it.
Oh, I touched it. Probably felt the same as what it did almost when it was alive, cold-blooded.
It did have a funny feel, texture of the animal.
Big piece of rubber.
I touched it with one finger, and I had to use less oil.
Because they only had it off the end.
They put hand cleaner with hands. They put straight gasoline.
You have one that bleaches it off the hands, and that's what I wanted to do.
And finally they decided something had to be done about
We
it.
come to the point where no matter what it cost, it had to go.
They knew something had to be done, and they did something.
One thing led to another, so they called Ramsel, a man named Ramsel.
I was notified by the town that they contacted me, came down to dig a hole of that. It was kind of a hazy, overcast day, and the sun didn't shine. I think there was like a crowd of 15 or 20 people after we showed up. There were a lot of people, maybe 100 or so people.
Word spread fast, everybody in town was there, and I just wondered where they all going, you know? So I went too.
So we dug a hole as close as we could, and before I got the hole dug, he accidentally slid on his own. And sort of graceful. I mean, it was so big, just took its time, just sort of the side caved in a little bit. He rolled in, he slipped in and rolled up, belly up. And they finally rolled into the hole. But sort of quieted down. They were kind of respectful. They were kind of sad to see it go.
I don't know how to explain it. Something that you never think of, dying. You always hear stories that a whale is a passed on fisherman's soul.
Maybe you think how small I was. Yeah. But a lot of people think, well, I'm so big, I'm so great. No matter how powerful they are, something will happen in life that will cause people to say, how small am I anyway?
We're both mammals who reach the pinnacle of our place, and they just seem to be close to us. I feel close to them.
And we buried it 6 feet over the top.
They've got gravel stuff covered it all
I've dug graves, for humans there in Colorado also. It just seemed different to bury something with no box. Just putting raw earth right back onto his body.
You picture him as being immortal, like a free soul, free will. You just don't see him dying. It was sad. It was very sad.
And it took about 2.5 hours, 3 hours to dig the hole and then fill it back in. In my new time, we was all finished. I think I got like $300 to bury this thing. Then the town paid right. Maybe the whale too, I don't know.
It was just a day's work for me to help bury a whale. I mean, it's an oddity to bury a
over. Just
whale.
something weird that had happened and something unforetold and
If you never did see it, you couldn't understand it, you know what I mean?
And the fellows are nice, they're still laying there. That's what all I can tell you about the whale.
he'll be down there since maybe I'll go down and take a stroll or
That's the way things went. And this is from Morristown, and Quebec, Maine, just another fish story.
So to me, that's sort of like what SALT does. It's all these interviews with lots of community members giving this information, but then it's structured in a way that I think is compelling. And there's action, and there's reflection, and there's like funny music. But also, I think it adds up to something in a way that I think all of SALT's work does, and I think a lot of like more traditional oral history work does as well. But there's something about a story, obviously, like where there's lots of writing about how humans are wired for story, and it's like such a compelling way for information to be passed on. So I think that's that's an example of that. So just another thing I want to talk quickly about is SALT has released its first ever narrative podcast. So if for those of you who don't know, like podcasts are definitely having their moment, and especially serialized podcasts. There's a podcast called Serial, which most people have heard of Serial. It's the one that sort of like launched the revolution of like, hey, like multi-part podcast series is good. So SALT actually on Thursday, the third episode of this is going to release, and it's called Sovereign, and it's about the tribes within Maine are different from any other tribe, native tribes within Maine's borders, different from any other native tribe in the United States, in that they don't have full powers of sovereignty the way other tribal nations do, and that's due to this like illegal treaty that they discovered in the 80s, and they sued the state, and it's a really wild story about who has the land and who has the power and why they're not sovereign. So that's sort of another example of what I think an earlier iteration of SALT might have just been like a bunch of straight interviews with maybe Wabanaki elders, is now being conceived and sold as like a narrative. But I also was thinking that not everything has to be a narrative, and I think sometimes like trying to fit something into a story is not always the best fit. So we've kind of come full circle in some ways recently. So we worked with the Portland Museum of Art to make an sort of enhanced audio guide for an upcoming, actually it's probably open now, series of exhibition of Walker Evans photographs. So this each student picked a photograph and sort of did some research of it and created an audio piece in response to it. So some of them are very sort of like, here's the story behind this, but one of them is just kind of sounds of, it's images of like a steel factory town. It's sort of images of steel being, are sounds of steel being manufactured as you look at it. And another person got an actress to sort of embody the role of this Alabama cotton tenant farmer wife. So it's, I think in some ways, this sort of breaking narrative and sort of creating an experience. And we also have sort of like online classes that we started to offer, like you all have. I think that's sort of common thread from the from 2020, 2021. But that's allowed us to sort of be more experimental. And you know, this is just, we have one right now called Beyond Story, and it's just like audio collages and essays and sort of getting abstract. So you know, I like to think that like, even though we've evolved to be an organization that is very much focused on telling stories and putting things into story form, that's not the only way to do documentary work, and that's not the only way to convey information. So I think what we're trying to do now is think about like what's beyond that, like what's after story, what else can we do, like some non-linear or inventive ways of telling stories, and that's what this collaboration with the Portland Museum of Art was about, and that's sort of what we're trying to do with some of our more esoteric, unusual online classes. So that's me. I think the only other thing I wanted to sort of mention is that, kind of bringing it back to Foxfire, is it was a constructivist sort of approach, and I'm not like a super constructivist, someone who's like super familiar with that concept, but basically what it is, it's an educational theory or practice where students kind of make their own meaning as they are, as they're learning. So they sort of produce something and they bring their own meaning to it, and they kind of create their own meaning as they're making it and sort of like inquiring what they're actually doing. And I think that is sort of what has been the through line with SALT, SALT all along. So thank you so much for inviting me down to speak, and I'm happy to answer any questions or have a conversation or anything else. So thanks. Yeah.
What is your role at SALT?
Oh, I'm the director of SALT. So I'm also a graduate of SALT. I went there in 2008. So my role, I actually teach one class there, which meets once a week, which is called the SALT Workshop, which is sort of like an investigation of various documentary forms. And then I also do all the hiring of the instructors and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Change light bulbs?
I don't change light bulbs. No, I do. I sweep out the classroom now. Yeah.
How far in the world has your work spread? I mean,
Yeah.
are there people that you hear from unexpectedly from another continent?
Mm-hmm.
Does that happen?
Yeah. So the SALT diaspora is really pretty remarkable. I think especially in like public media, you know, you can't scrape the surface too much before you find someone who went to SALT, like you know, This American Life, Radio Lab, StoryCorps, New York Times, New Yorker, we're kind of everywhere, and there's, you know, some promotional material we have that's like SALT students go on to be here, 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 and here. So it's a really, I think the people who are drawn to SALT are really ready to like fully launch themselves into something new, and I think that creates like a really passionate. But SALT is everywhere. Yeah, there's a lot of us. Any other questions? Yeah, in the back.
Do you still do internships, or is it now more?
No, the boat building and such. No, we don't do those anymore. It's just right now we're offering classes in radio and podcasting and short film are the two sort of main tracks that we're doing. So we just found over the years that we weren't getting applicants for writing anymore, and I don't know if that's because there's kind of a rise in like more MFA programs for writing, or if it's more about like a shift from print to digital forms like audio and short film or what. And then same with photography. It just seems like there wasn't as viable a career path right now for photographers. We weren't getting as many applicants in photography, so we started offering classes in short film. John?
Yeah, Isaac, do you have like a starter kit for communities so they could like bring the inspiration of salt? And, you know, if you did, what would be the first two things you would recommend?
Yeah, so I think, you know, for me, we don't necessarily offer like a, sorry, there's like a thing that just flew in. I thought it was a bat, but I think it was just like a little leaf or something. We don't offer right now like a SALT day for organizations. This is something that I would like to start doing. But for us, it really just starts with the interview, with sitting down with someone. I think that's probably the most powerful way to start any sort of project. And I don't know if it was in the bio that I gave you, but I used to work at StoryCorps as well. It's this sort of national oral history nonprofit radio program. And they have a list of great questions on their website, and they are really amazing, like open-ended questions, and they're actually like broken into like great questions about work, great questions about growing up, great questions about, you know, being in a family. So it's like a, is there a critter back there? What is it? A praying mantis?
There's a story.
Wow, yeah, really. We had bats in our house for like a year, and it was really, so I'm traumatized. So anyway, yeah, I would say like the best thing you could do, I think, would be just to start a conversation and like encourage people to interview each other. And I think that's sort of a great, and you know, you can record with your smartphones these days and get like pretty decent audio. So I think I wouldn't let like a technological barrier stop you from just trying to start something. Yeah.
Do you have any relationship? Maine has lots of museums and bookstores. It's the main publishers and authors and writers groups. And I was wondering, Maine is such a huge state going north that to find some of these people, other than maybe the people you know through your own networks, that I just wondered what kind of network you have throughout the state, and maybe museums and historic house museums also could help find some of these people for your stories and documentaries.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea, and I think that's one of the things that I would like to do a better job of, is really like expanding our network beyond the greater Portland area. But you know, there's 50 years worth of SALT stories, and SALT has pretty much, you know, been over the whole state. And a lot of times, I'm amazed by how students find the stories that they do, and we'll give them sort of tips on like research and like what, you know, how to find a character, how to approach somebody. But I would like to do sort of more targeted like partnerships with organizations, like we did with the Portland Museum here. And I think it's something that SALT used to do more of. And actually, we are working with this one organization called the Third Coast, which is like a traveling oral history project that kind of goes up the coast of Maine. And it's run by this woman, Galen Koch, and she also works a lot with like archives, like oral history archives, and teaches how to turn those into stories. So like, how do you take sort of like a 60-minute interview with someone about knitting a lobster head trap, and then you sort of make a narrative within that. So she actually has encountered a bunch of interviews that were done for SALT in the 70s about Eastport, Maine, which is like another very far east town. So we're going to build a class around kind of turning those into like stories and then exhibit them on her website. But I think that's something that I would like to do more of, like, because Maine is huge, and like, I don't know anyone in, you know, Presque Isle, Maine, which is way up there. But for Sovereign, the podcast that we're doing about the tribes in Maine, we did work with the Penobscot Nation tribal ambassador to tell that story. So that's a relationship that I'm hoping to deepen for sure.
How would we find that podcast?
It's available wherever you get your podcasts. You know, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, those kinds of things. If you search for Sovereign or the SALT Institute, it'll be there. Yeah.
Maybe some of us saw the special on public broadcasting just this past weekend about people's reflections on 9/11.
Yeah.
That was fascinated by a couple of things. One is that those reflections changed so much over the years, and so there was like 15 or 20 year lapse between the initial recording and what people had to say more recently. And the other thing was that you might think, and I've been involved in some production, you might think that it would take a lot of production skill and so on, and it might. I don't know if you saw what the reaction was, but the raw material simply was that they set up a booth, which was a private booth, and anybody that had a story to tell could simply go in and nobody even turned on the camera. The person who was speaking turned on the camera and turned off the camera. And some of the reflections were just spectacular because they may have been comments that the person wouldn't have even felt comfortable giving to one other person that they might not have known. But to do that reflection, it was just inspirational to listen to what happened, to people's recounting of it, and most especially to what difference it made in their lives. So, I mean, the story of the whale is really a great story.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are a million stories that we know about right here in town. So it'd be great to be able to get involved in doing something.
Yeah, totally. And I think, people really, it's really rare that we just sit and listen to someone else. And I think it's very powerful on both sides. It's very powerful to do that, to like just sit and listen to someone. But then as someone who is being asked to share your story, your life experience, it's also very powerful. And I think it's, it's flattering. like a lot of people, are very flattered by it. But it's also, I think, it can be a very powerful experience just listening to people and just telling your story.
Has South ever offered any classes or stories about the music of Maine? I mean, the mouth harp was wonderful in the 6-minute Lubeck story.
Yeah, there definitely are stories about music in the archives. I don't know off the top of my head like what all they did. There's certainly ones about sea shanties and those kinds of things. And a recent student found a Portland bus driver who was also writing an original rock opera, and interviewed him about that. And some of the music was featured in the piece. So, are we one more? Or are we done?
One more question for Isaac.
Do you want
I
to
just
go?
wanted to know if high school students are still involved. It sounds like you've maybe moved to older students.
Yeah, so there's this great organization in Maine called Blunt Youth Radio, which works with high school students. So right now we're kind of working on trying to do something with them and the Portland Public Library to kind of go back to doing something for high school students. So there has not been for a while, but it's something that we would like to resurrect. Yeah.
Isaac, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So Isaac, will you stick around for a little bit if people have more questions for you? Okay. So one thing I wanted to do, I forgot. I wanted to say thank you to Amesbury Community TV. They are here. They're helping us stream this to our Facebook community. And we got a nice note from somebody from our Facebook community, John and Gail Lyman, who say a shout out to their former colleagues who are board members with the Carriage Museum. So I think we're here. The lights are on the plaza. There's some refreshments and coffee. I have another special treat. This is a tradition. We're starting this year. I've got Prosecco. If people would like to celebrate with a little bottle of some bubbly, see me over here and I'll start opening and pouring. And otherwise, I thank you all for coming to our annual meeting. It's great. Let's hope that we have another great year. And thank you, everybody. Thank you, Isaac Kestenbaum, and thank you, everyone, for coming. Here's to great things.